Hi David and Regina. Hi guys. My name is Dmytro Zlenko, and we got to know David and Regina 2 years ago when I went on semester at sea as an international student from Ukraine. In a few weeks I will embark the ship once again to sail another voyage, this time an Atlantic. So right now at this moment I'm visiting Moscow, visiting Kira, because we don't have any embassy in Ukraine, Ghana embassy in Ukraine, so we need to go to Moscow, and along that it's a nice opportunity to visit Kira, because I learned about semester at sea about like a few years ago when I just randomly were scrolling social media, and I've seen the article made by Kira and post about semester at sea, so I've got inspired. So it's kind of really nice to share that like link before like of knowing semester at sea, passing it forward, and giving you information as well about that. And so tell a couple of words about your voyage. How was that? You sailed
a couple of words? It was bloody amazing, that's how it was. Do you have any more particular questions?
You sailed when?
I sailed in the fall of 2013. Oh my god, that was a long time ago.
That was
old.
50 years of semester
That was the 50th anniversary of semester at sea. You don't get that merchandise.
No, we don't. We have just like...
Yeah, you guys just have the flags.
Instead of t-shirt. Like
yeah. I have the 50th anniversary, but I wasn't the luckiest student on that voyage. I mean, in that year, because I did the fall voyage and the spring voyagers got to sail with Archbishop Desmond Tutu, the famous architect. Amazing. The famous architect of the Truth and Reconciliation program in South Africa. So they got to sail with a legend. We just got to sail. We had two NASA astronauts on board, Pinky Nelson and Catherine Thornton, both on missions in space. Years ago, Catherine actually was one of the first female NASA astronauts of all time. So that was pretty damn cool. Pinky taught astronomy and Kathy was the academic dean.
That's great. Yeah, we got among guest director of Cape Town Opera with us. He sailed from Ghana to Cape Town. Nice.
Desmond Tutu came to visit us in Cape Town. He's very old.
Still cool.
It's very cool. His daughters brought him, and it was a very, very, very cheerful and inspiring sort of experience because he has a great sense of humor.
What's one thing you remember about that meeting?
He laughed. His laugh. The way he laughed was absolutely inciting because he just caught across the audience. You couldn't not laugh with him. And it was just such a free and happy and careless laugh of a person who's lived through so much and suffered through so much and survived multiple cancer incidents and still persevered and still kept all the love and openness in his heart, and it was pretty amazing. I was amazed. And also he joked about the Virgin Mary. He actually told a knock-knock joke about the Virgin Mary. I think I have an audio somewhere, but I can't quite remember what exactly the joke was about, but that kind of shocked me that an archbishop told knock-knock jokes about Virgin Mary.
Yeah, yesterday we were talking with you about Mikhail Gorbachev.
Mikhail Gorbachev, yes.
Gorbachev, yeah.
The first president of the USSR.
Because when semester at sea voyage came to visit Ukraine many years ago, the ship came to Odessa, Gorbachev came on the ship and we were talking there. And Kira, due to us, she's working as a journalist in Moscow, she got a chance to know the translator who was at that moment on the ship translating Gorbachev. And she got many chances to talk to Gorbachev personally while as well translating him and doing her journalist job.
No, actually we just had lunches and dinners.
Actually, yeah, he was singing.
One part like that. He sings. He used to sing more, but he still sings. And he sings in Ukrainian. Because half of his ancestry comes from Ukraine. Yeah. It's like, I'm an introvert. I actually hate reaching out to new people and trying to engage them in conversation. Definitely hate phone calls. It was great that there was no cell reception
no
on
internet
the ship.
at all.
No internet. It was beautiful.
Just a email.
It was beautiful. Although my parents just completely ignored me for 4 months. You
Really?
know?
You didn't?
Oh yeah.
You weren't in touch?
Well, I mean, when I was in port, I would
yeah.
Skype them from time to time, but they would never even write an email.
No email.
I was kind of scandalized.
So wait, were you in touch with anyone on C-mail? Like any emails?
I mean, it's funny because a girl from my university class, who wasn't even my great friend back then, she just emailed me all the time because she was like, oh, this is so cool. This is like old style letter exchange. I'm going to practice my English. She was the only one. That her and my work assignments, my freelance translation job. That was it. I did know her well, but she wasn't really a close friend. And she was the only one who showed interest in, you know, actually staying in touch with me during the voyage, because she was like, there would be an interesting experience like in the olden days where people exchanged letters when they traveled and wrote travelogues. So I actually wrote some kind of travelogue.
And so you were talking about stereotypes that...
we were talking about the things that I carried out of the voyage, basically, and we touched upon a topic of how traveling and this kind of educational traveling helps you break stereotypes and sort of see through the media propaganda or the rumors or, you know, the cliches that are always circulating around, you know, in the media, on the internet, and people's blogs, you know. So until you yourself sort of come and see, you wouldn't be able to truly comprehend what's going on in this country or that country. And for instance, take Russia and Ukraine.
Yeah, I was afraid to go to Russia. That's crossing the border, because if you watch media, you never know what
the propaganda is insane. It's like every Russian wants to eat Ukrainian babies, and like Russians go, Ukrainians eat Russian babies. There's a big like terrorists, yeah, and it's crazy. Like I have family members living in Kiev, and I've been sort of, well, I haven't visited them for a while because of logistical difficulties. I was afraid of flying for quite a long time after getting into, like, after our airplane got struck by lightning in Ohio. Yeah, that was unnerving. But anyway, it's just you have to travel to a place to break through those stereotypes, because talk to people, you know, and then they would explain their own perspectives. Of course, every person's perspective is different. You know, a person living in Crimea would have a very different perception of the Russian-Ukrainian conflict than a person living in Moscow or Kiev, because, you know, it's so remote. But it's just, you know, oftentimes you would meet people who have never been abroad or haven't traveled extensively, or just went to, you know, like stereotypical seaside town and saw nothing. And they would give you strong opinions about different international affairs. And I mean, if you don't know, if you haven't been, if you haven't researched the issue, you would believe whatever they say. It's kind of like, you know, this web of not lies, but, you know, misconceptions being spread around.
Yeah, and speaking of lies and misconceptions, now I think it's getting popular as a mini-series Chernobyl.
Oh yeah.
So it's like Ukraine, people might ask about that. And
I have not seen it yet, just because I know it's brilliant. I absolutely know that it's brilliant, but I know that it's heavy kind of watching, and I know that I need to have sort of like mental energy to cope with that and to process it. So I don't want to sort of binge watch it without thinking. I want to really dive into it.
Yeah, especially
so I'm saving it for later.
Personal perception of, and getting to know Gorbachev. So you can compare it with Gorbachev from the movie, and we talked like what he was talking about Chernobyl, that he didn't know that much.
That's true. I work as a journalist in Moscow, and through my work I got to meet Mikhail Gorbachev, the ex-president of the USSR, who brought down the Berlin Wall. And I mean, he's a very different person now from what he used to be back then. It was over 20 years ago. But his take on it now is that he remembers that he was reported about a fire at the atomic reactor, the nuclear reactor. So the report that he got was, there is a fire at Chernobyl nuclear reactor. So he told them, as he said, you know, if it's a fire, take out the fire. I'm not a fireman. Why are you sort of coming to me with this? And then the following day, he got the CIA report about radiation and explosion, and he wasn't sure he should believe it. And the academic who built the reactor came to him and said, that's impossible, my reactors cannot explode. They're designed in a way that they absolutely cannot explode.
Very safe.
Very safe, extremely safe. And only, I think, on the third day, he got the reports from the Swedish radio, which was quoting the radiation meters, that there was a radiation cloud moving towards Sweden. And that's when he actually believed the whole thing and started the investigation, because the Americans could lie at the time, you know, it was still the time of the Cold War, but why would the Swedes lie? So
yeah, it just lies from the very bottom to the very top.
Oh yeah,
story,
that was such an attempt to cover it up. And I mean, we just saw something similar in modern Russia, which just turns out is not quite as modern as we would like to believe.
We'll get back to that. Like in Ukraine, my mom told that she was in that time in Kiev, that they didn't know what happened. They seen the windows were covered, windows where governmental official lives, and they're like, why they're covered? Only later they get to know that you should cover windows in such situations.
Yep.
So it very, very slowly people got educated about that, about what happened. Just like few hours drive from Kiev, from where I used to live.
We kind of have deviated from the topic of semester C, but
yeah,
yes, this is how propaganda works.
That's like important, like nowadays.
That is,
people
yes,
know. So,
yes.
So coming back to modern Russia, I guess we can cover
and visit
that
Russia.
Well. And Ukraine, of course.
And Ukraine, yay.
Coming to modern Russia, what difference do you see from your perspective in the US and in Russia in terms of how free you are, how free can you speak?
It's quite interesting because Russians have never, I feel like Russians have never considered themselves fully free. In the Soviet times, you know, the government would decide it all for you. In the attempt to build a socialist government, everybody knew that they were equally poor, you know, equally rightless. Everybody was sort of equal in that. And also people got used to the fact that the government decided everything. They decided how much pension or salary you would get. They decided how you would sort of get your apartments or cars and when and if. They decided whether you could travel or not. And the problem is that a lot of people who grew up during the Soviet times and who are still alive these days, they grew up with this model of thinking that they don't have to think for themselves, because what's the use? I mean, they can change it.
Everything's already set.
It's already settled. They don't
Grow
have
up,
to do.
study, work.
And now we have, for instance, the Institute of Private Property that never existed in the Soviet Union, and people don't know what to do with it. Like we're here now in a 5-story apartment building. It's a small one, just 30 apartments, and most people are private owners. Like it's their private property registered with the government. But they don't understand what it means to be the owner of private property. That they don't only have rights, they also have responsibilities. That if you have private property in an apartment building, you should be concerned of how the building is maintained, because it's your property, how the land around the building is maintained. So now there's a renovation coming up. And out of 30 apartments, me and my family are the only ones who actually got concerned about the quality and the quality control. So now we're going to be monitoring the renovations. Because everybody else, they want to judge, they want to argue, they want to feel important, but they don't want to do anything because it's not in their mentality. In the US, there's the opposite. There's this ideology and there's this mentality of absolute freedom. Like America, freest country in the world. And the kids are brought up thinking that they're all individuals, they should think differently, they should, the world basically revolves around themselves. And that's also problematic, I feel like, because if you're brought up thinking that the world, you are the individual, and the whole world should bend to your will, and that, you know, it should all be about you, it raises very egocentric people who don't understand what it means to be a member of a community. Who don't have the slightest idea of about the concept of Ubuntu, which is an African concept of togetherness, of unity, of it takes a village to raise a child, which is exactly true, you know. It's not enough to have parents who teach children to be this or that. The society forms, the environment forms the children, the society forms the children. So I feel like in Russia there's a much more sort of social, communal approach Like, my kids are your kids, sometimes too much. Like, strangers on the street could be like, oh, that baby's so cute. Or, like, they could actually touch your pregnant belly. My friends actually had to deal with us. Like, who are you? Why are you touching me?
Especially elderly people, right?
Like, elderly ladies, yes.
Like so-called babushka.
Babushkas, yeah. That's absolutely. But in general, so there are two sort of sides, and none of them is exactly right. And another problem is the US, the concept of freedom in the US is sort of, it could be debatable at this point because, for instance, there's no state censorship, although the president may refuse to speak to the media, even though it's in the constitution that the media is allowed to have access to the government figures, etc., etc. But the media imposes self-censorship on themselves because the lawsuits are so expensive, the lawyers are so expensive in the US that sometimes it's, by the way, in Sweden that also happens, in Finland that also happens, self-censorship in the media as opposed to state censorship, which is true in Russia. We have a lot of state censorship here, unofficial, but quite official actually. So the media limit themselves just not to have to deal with the lawsuits, unless they're very rich media. But unfortunately in 2019 it's very hard to remain a rich media outlet. So, but in general, I found more similarities than discrepancies and differences between Americans and Russians, to be honest, because it's all universal. We all have universal problems. We want our children to be happy. We want our elderly parents to be taken care of. We want, and just sort of, not have to count the pennies. We want healthcare. Russia has universal healthcare, which is free to Russian citizens, but the quality...
Do you have this joke that says free medicine is expensive, paid medicine is expensive, but free medicine
is it's even more expensive. We do, because it's a matter of complete luck. If you happen upon a good doctor, you get world-class medical help, and etc. But you could also face a very bad doctor, like lack of medicine, and it can be a real mess. Russia is very much behind in many aspects of medicine.
Same with Ukraine.
And the same with Ukraine. The US is extremely advanced. But who really can have access to all of that? Because, what if you can't afford insurance? There is no universal health coverage. There's Obamacare, which has a very limited set of, medical procedures that it covers. And lots of health practitioners, doctors, GPs, they don't take Obamacare. They don't want to work with it. It's a lot of paperwork. It's a lot of, new tax things. They just don't want to deal with it, so they don't take it. So sometimes you can't choose. I mean, you can choose, but you can't choose the doctor you would like to go to just because he doesn't take Obamacare. Otherwise, you have to pay sometimes $600, $700, $800 a month for your insurance. And if you don't have insurance at all, after the first year you get
great kids.
Fines. Yeah, whatever.
we're getting out to global topics.
Healthcare should be free, but it also should be high quality, and that also should be managed by the government. Yeah, that's the.
Okay, sounds good. So let's get back to semester at sea.
Right.
Yeah. So, do you have anything else to add?
About what?
About semester at sea, about seeing the world. Okay, is it safe for Americans to go to Russia?
Absolutely. God damn it. What would happen to them? I mean, okay, if you worked in the military or in US intelligence or, yeah, that's pretty much it. Or if you're a businessman who wants to open a business in Russia, you should be very careful here. They won't come after you straight away, but they might afterwards.
But as a tourist, that's probably fine.
As a tourist, what could happen?
More than welcome.
Follow the rules. Get acquainted with the laws. Like don't drink in public. Carry your ID. Register when you need to. I've had many friends come and visit. They all loved it, and. There's the Trans-Siberian Railway that takes you all across Russia for not a lot of money, actually. There are national parks and national wonders there are incredible places here. There are super interesting cities like Moscow, St. Petersburg, my hometown, go visit, Kazan, and so many more. And it's an incredible country to travel. The tourist infrastructure is not, it can't compete with American or European tourist infrastructure, but we're sort of slowly getting there.
Kind of interesting.
It's also
in that
cheaper.
Case.
Much cheaper to travel than Europe or the States. Yeah.
Yes, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for giving the information, because we were...
I'm not talking about semester at sea, but instead talking about...
It's important, it's
Chernobyl.
important, yeah. Like, it's about global perspective. It's about getting to know the world.
Yeah.
Thank you for hosting me as well. It's a pleasure to stay on this very couch.
Couch surfing.
Yeah. Getting to know the people, that's great. Because you can...
By the way, use couch
friends.
surfing. Couch surfing is a website, couchsurfing.org. Once you're of age, as in 18, go and travel with couch surfing. This is how you sort of dive into the culture of a place, because you stay with locals, it's free.
Yeah.
You make cookies and you talk about the place. It's beautiful.
It's all about people. As my
It's all
professor
about
of global
people.
studies said, Don, his name Don, it's all about people.
It's all about people.
Thank you so much. We will be in touch with you. Bye.
Cheers.